They handed out presents to every single kid around the tree. Colorful boxes with bows, names written in shiny marker. Laughter filled the room, the kind of warm chaos you'd expect on Christmas night. Except there was one child sitting quietly, empty-handed. My daughter, Lena. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just watched as her cousins tore through wrapping paper and screamed with joy. I sat next to her on the couch, stiff, my stomach twisted into a knot. I could feel the burn in my throat, trying to swallow it all down. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that her name had been missed, that someone would laugh and say, "Oh, wait, we forgot Lena's." But then my brother, Trent, looked directly at me across the room and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's lucky we even invited her. She's not really family." The words hit harder than a slap. And worse, he was smirking, like it was a joke, like humiliating a child, my child, in front of the entire family was somehow funny. I turned to my mother, Evelyn, who was refilling her wine glass, not even looking at me. She gave a short laugh and said, just like her mother. Always begging. My jaw clenched. I looked around the room. Not one person stood up for us. Not one. My daughter looked up at me. Her eyes didn't ask for anything. Not explanation, not defense. She didn't need me to explain why her uncle just said she wasn't family. She already understood, and I hated that. I hated that in 9 short years, my daughter had already learned what it felt like to be othered, to be tolerated instead of welcomed, to be ignored instead of loved. I didn't speak. I didn't get up. I froze. Lena, though, she moved. She stood up from the couch, walked quietly over to the tree, and knelt down. Everyone stopped talking. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs as I watched her small hands reach behind the trunk. She pulled out a small box, wrapped in reused blue tissue paper and taped at the corners. A handmade tag dangled off it, the ink slightly smudged. To Uncle Trent. My breath caught. I hadn't brought that. I didn't know she had. She turned around, walked calmly to where Trent was sitting, and held out the box. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" She answered with a soft voice, "I brought a present, too. For you." The entire room fell into an unnatural silence. The kind where everyone knows they just witnessed something they weren't supposed to. Not because it was wrong, but because it was real, raw, uncomfortable in the way truth often is. Trent took the box. He opened it. And the moment he looked inside, his expression changed completely. He didn't say a word, and for the first time that night, he was the one who had nothing to say. Christmas has always been complicated for me. As a child, it was magical, full of laughter, joy, and the promise of being loved no matter what. But that changed as I got older, especially after the divorce. Suddenly, holidays felt more like a battleground than a celebration. I'm Ava. I'm a single mom, and for the past 5 years, it's been just me and my daughter, Lena. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the bills piled up higher than I could manage, and nights when the silence of the house felt too loud. But I had Lena, and she was everything I needed. Her laugh, her smile, her excitement for life. It kept me going when things were tough. Every year, I tried to make Christmas special. We didn't have the big, luxurious celebrations that some families did, but we had each other, and that was enough. I taught her that Christmas wasn't just about presents or decorations. It was about love, connection, and the simple joy of being together. But this year was different. This year, I agreed to go to my mom's house for Christmas dinner. My mom, Evelyn, is complicated. She's the kind of woman who speaks her mind, but always with a sharp edge. She's the kind of mother who demands perfection. From everyone, especially me. Since my divorce, she'd made it clear that I wasn't quite good enough in her eyes, not the way I used to be when I was married. The way she looked at me like I had failed somehow always stung. Trent, my older brother, was another story. He was successful, had a beautiful wife, Caroline, and 2 perfect kids. To them, I was the black sheep, the one who hadn't figured it out. Every time I walked into a room, I could feel their eyes on me, sizing me up, judging me. They didn't understand what it was like to be a single mother, to juggle everything alone. They didn't see the late nights I spent working on my side business just to keep food on the table for Lena. I didn't want to go to Christmas dinner. I'd made up my mind to skip it. But then Lena started talking about seeing her cousins, about how much she missed them, about how excited she was to be a part of the family again. She didn't even know the tension that hung thick in the air every time we walked into that house. She just wanted to be surrounded by the people she thought were family, so I went, for her. The house was everything I remembered. Too grand, too pristine, too full of expectations. The tree was decorated in gold and silver, its lights twinkling like something out of a movie. The dining room table was set for more than 20 people, plates shining, silverware polished, and glasses filled with a type of wine none of us could afford. I didn't belong there. I hadn't in years. I walked in, feeling the old familiar knot in my stomach. I smiled at my mother, tried to make small talk with Trent, but the tension was unbearable. I could already tell this was going to be one of those holidays, the kind where you just hold your breath and get through it, hoping for a miracle that never comes. Lena, on the other hand, was completely at ease. She was always like that, a natural light in any room. She wasn't concerned with the undercurrents of judgment that I felt so keenly. She was just happy to be there, surrounded by family, even if they didn't always make her feel welcome. As the evening wore on, I kept stealing glances at my daughter. She was so grown up for her age, but still so tender. I couldn't help but feel protective of her, especially in a place like this. I didn't want her to feel the weight of the world the way I had. I didn't want her to know what it felt like to have someone question her worth just because she didn't fit into their narrow view of what family should be. Dinner passed in a blur. The conversation was surface level, polite but strained. My mom kept commenting on how beautiful everything was, as though the beauty of the house could mask the ugliness of the way they treated me. Trent made a few offhand remarks about my choices in life, and Caroline kept smiling that tight smile that always made my skin crawl. But then came the presents. Every child except Lena got something. They were handed out like rewards for good behavior. My niece got a shiny new tablet. My nephew received a brand new bike. Everyone else was opening boxes with excitement, with joy, with the unmistakable feeling of being included, being loved. And Lena? She just sat there, quietly, her eyes bright with anticipation, but she didn't say a word. She knew, somehow, that she wasn't a part of their world. Not truly. I watched as she waited, hoping for something, anything, to come her way. But it didn't. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how hard I tried to make things right, no matter how much love I poured into our little family, we'd never be enough for them. And that hurt more than I could have ever prepared for. Lena sat perfectly still. Her little hands were folded in her lap, her back straight, her face calm. But I could see the way her eyes followed every gift that passed from one adult to a laughing child. She didn't say anything, and neither did I. That silence between us was screaming. One by one, Trent called out names with exaggerated cheer. To Maddie, from Aunt Caroline and me. To Ethan, from Nana Evelyn. Bright paper flew through the air. Ribbons were tossed aside. The room echoed with excitement. Someone turned up the Christmas music, and it made everything feel more cruel. Underneath all the glitter and fake cheer was something colder, sharper. I waited. I kept telling myself that maybe Lena's gift had just slipped under the tree skirt. Maybe someone had forgotten to hand it to her. I even stood up and glanced toward the back of the tree, hoping, praying I would find something with her name on it. But there was nothing. Trent looked at me, then down at Lena. That was when he said it. She's lucky we even invited her. She's not really family. He said it like it was a fact, as if it had been decided long ago, like he had the right to define who belonged and who didn't. A few heads turned. Someone let out a nervous laugh, but no one said anything. Not Caroline, not my mother, not even the cousins' parents who had once asked me for favors when I was married and doing well. Then my mother, Evelyn, topped it off like it was some twisted cherry on a rotten sundae. Just like her mother, always begging. She laughed as she said it, shaking her head as though she were sharing a memory that amused her. I sat there, frozen. For a split second, I couldn't even feel my hands. I was humiliated, not just for myself, but for Lena. They hadn't just insulted me. They had erased her. They had made her invisible. I looked at Lena. Her face didn't change. She still had that soft, composed look. Her lips were pressed together gently, her eyes thoughtful. I wondered what she was thinking, what she was feeling. My stomach turned because I knew she was absorbing every second of it. This wasn't about a toy or a box wrapped in shiny paper. This was about being left out, being publicly rejected, being told without saying it directly that she didn't matter. I wanted to get up. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to grab my daughter and walk out of that house and never look back. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Something inside me held me down. Maybe it was years of being talked over, laughed at, dismissed. Maybe it was the fear of what they'd say next if I made a scene. Maybe it was shame. I'd been raised to stay quiet in that house, to play nice, to avoid drama. And now I was choking on my silence. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't look at me for reassurance. Instead, she slowly stood up, brushed off her dress, and walked across the room to the tree. No one stopped her. No one asked her what she was doing. The music played and the adults pretended they didn't notice, but everyone was watching. She crouched near the base of the tree and reached behind one of the large boxes. Her small fingers tugged at something hidden deep in the branches. When she stood up, she was holding a small, lumpy package. It was wrapped in a piece of blue tissue paper, taped at the sides. It looked like something a child had put together with their allowance and their heart. A simple tag was taped to the top, to Uncle Trent. She walked toward him with quiet steps, holding the package in both hands. Trent looked confused. He sat up straighter and stared at the gift, then back at her. She stopped in front of him and held it out. "This is for you," she said softly. "I brought a present, too." The air changed. The room didn't move. For the first time all night, no one said a word. The laughter died. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. People turned in their seats, eyes widened. Caroline looked at Trent like she wasn't sure what to do. Trent reached out and took the package from her hands. He didn't say thank you. He didn't smile. He just held it like he didn't understand what it was. And for the first time all night, the weight in my chest began to shift. Lena had spoken, not with anger, not with tears, with action, with clarity. While the rest of us froze, she moved. Whatever was inside that package, I knew it mattered more than anything else in the room, and something told me it was about to change everything. Trent turned the package over in his hands like it was a foreign object. The tissue paper was wrinkled, thin in places, with corners unevenly taped. He peeled back the edges with a kind of detached curiosity, still wearing the smug expression he had worn all night. But then his face changed. He pulled out a small folded paper and a drawing done in crayon and pencil. It was bright and careful, the kind of picture only a child would make with that much honesty. Everyone in the family was sitting at the Christmas table, drawn with big smiling faces, red and green details surrounding them. My mom's curly hair was a scribbly halo. Caroline's necklace had been drawn with gold dots. Even the dog had made it into the corner of the page, but what made Trent freeze was the figure at the far edge of the drawing. Him, alone, separate, sitting in a chair that was just barely touching the frame of the scene. There was no smile on his face, no color on his shirt, just a gray outline. On the back of the drawing, Lena had written a message in simple, uneven handwriting. "It hurts to be left out. Maybe now you understand." He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. The silence stretched so long that my mother asked, "What is it?" from across the room, her tone sharp and annoyed. Trent didn't respond. He just kept looking at the picture. Lena stood still in front of him. She didn't flinch or step back. Her hands were by her sides. She looked calm, not angry or afraid. She didn't look like a child who had just been insulted by the people who were supposed to protect her. She looked like someone who had decided to tell the truth, whether or not it was welcome. Caroline leaned in and read the note over Trent's shoulder. I watched her eyes shift, her lips pressed together tightly. She didn't say anything either. Everyone else in the room waited, unsure of what to do. The atmosphere had cracked. The warmth that had been artificially layered into the evening, the decorations, the music, the carefully set table, had all been peeled back. What was left was raw. That's when I stood up. I didn't plan it. My body just moved. For the first time that night, I felt taller than I had in years. I looked at my brother, then at my mother, then at every person in that room who had sat in silence as my daughter was dismissed, like she didn't matter. "You've spent years making me feel like I'm not enough," I said. "You ignored me when I asked for help. You turned your back when I needed family, but I stayed quiet because I didn't want to fight. I thought keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself." I paused and looked at Lena, who was still standing beside Trent. "But I won't stay quiet while you do it to her. Not my daughter. Not ever." I crossed the room and took Lena's hand. She looked up at me and I could see it in her eyes. Relief, but more than that. Trust. She had given them a chance to be better, and when they failed, she hadn't let it break her. "I'm proud of you," I whispered to her as we turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" my mother snapped from her seat. "Home," I said. "Someplace we belong." As we walked away, I heard a few hushed voices, the kind of quiet panic that spreads when the truth has just hit too hard and too fast. I didn't look back. When we got to the front door, one of the younger cousins, Maddie, about Lena's age, came running after us. She reached out and slipped something into Lena's hand. It was a silver bracelet she had just unwrapped, still sparkling with a tiny snowflake charm. "This is for you," she said softly. "You should have had a present, too." Lena smiled, nodded, and squeezed her hand. We stepped out into the cold. The air felt crisp and alive, not heavy like it had inside. As we walked down the driveway, Lena held the bracelet tightly and looked up at me. "I didn't want to hurt Uncle Trent," she said. "I just wanted him to see." I looked at her, holding back tears. "He saw," I said, "and so did everyone else." We got in the car. I started the engine. The radio played a soft version of Silent Night, and for once, that silence felt like peace, not punishment. We didn't talk much on the drive home. The city was quiet, dusted with snow, and the holiday lights on the houses we passed glowed softly in the dark. Lena leaned against the window, watching the world go by with her bracelet still clasped in her hand. I glanced over at her, a lump in my throat that I hadn't been able to swallow since we walked out of that house. My daughter had stood in front of a room full of adults and told the truth in a way most of them never could. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't trying to shame anyone. She had simply refused to let them erase her. That night, after we got home and Lena was tucked into bed, I sat in the kitchen with a mug of tea that had gone cold in my hands. I thought about everything that had happened, the years of silence I'd endured, the way my mother had dismissed me, the smirk on Trent's face when he made his cruel remark, and the way he froze when he opened her gift. I thought about the picture again. That moment when everyone saw what Lena had drawn, how clear and cutting it had been. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't argued. She had created something honest, something undeniable, and it had landed like a hammer in that perfectly polished living room. The next morning, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw Trent's name, but something told me to pick up. He didn't start with hello. "I was out of line," he said. "I didn't think she'd even notice. She's a kid." I didn't say anything. I waited. He cleared his throat. But she did notice, and so did everyone else. "I opened her gift again last night after you left." Caroline cried. I just sat there staring at it. I couldn't stop thinking about how she drew me outside the family. "You were," I said. "You put yourself there." He went quiet. "I didn't mean what I said about her not being family," he added. "I was just being, I don't know, stupid. Mean, you were being honest," I said. "That's what hurts." He sighed. "I don't want her to remember me like that." "You don't get to choose what she remembers," I said. "You only get to choose what you do now." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I want to make it right. For her, not for me. Can I come by today? Just me." I didn't answer right away. I thought about how easy it would be to say no, to protect her from any more disappointment. But I also thought about what Lena had said in the car the night before. I just wanted him to see. If she was brave enough to show him, I could be brave enough to let him respond. "You can come by," I said. "But if she doesn't want to talk to you, you'll respect that." He agreed. A few hours later, he showed up at our apartment with a small gift bag in his hands. Nothing flashy, just a plain brown paper bag with a blue ribbon tied around the handle. Lena was on the couch reading when I opened the door. Trent stepped in, glanced at me, then knelt in front of her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was wrong. That picture you gave me, it made me realize what kind of man I was becoming. And I don't want to be that. You gave me something important. I didn't deserve it, but I'm grateful you did." He handed her the bag. Inside was a simple sketch pad and a fresh box of colored pencils. Not expensive, but thoughtful. At the bottom was a note he'd written in block letters. "Thank you for showing me what family really means." Lena looked up at him, her expression unreadable at first. Then she smiled. "Now you're back in the picture," she said. He let out a breath that sounded more like a release than relief. Before he left, he turned to me. "Still have a lot to fix," he said, "but I'm starting with her." That night, I framed the drawing she gave him. I wanted her to see it every day, not as a reminder of being left out, but as proof of her strength. She didn't fight back with anger or spite. She held up a mirror and they finally saw themselves. And in that moment, my daughter didn't just find her voice. She helped someone else find their heart. Later that week, I caught Lena sitting at the kitchen table, coloring in her new sketch pad. She had drawn another family scene. This time, everyone was sitting together. There was laughter in the faces, warmth in the colors. And this time, Uncle Trent was right in the middle, smiling, with Lena standing beside him. I asked her about it, curious how she felt after everything. She looked up at me and said, "Sometimes people just don't know how to be kind until you show them what unkindness looks like." It stunned me. Not just the words, but the way she said them. With calm, with peace. She didn't carry bitterness. She had every reason to, but she had chosen something stronger. That moment stayed with me. I had spent so many years trying to earn approval from people who measured love in conditions, who thought worth was based on titles, money, marriage, or staying silent to keep the peace. I'd worked so hard to keep Lena away from the rejection I had endured growing up, but in that house, on that night, it still found her. But she didn't crumble. She responded in the most honest way a child can. She told the truth, not with cruelty or defiance, but with heart. She made them see what they didn't want to admit, and instead of shrinking in the face of rejection, she stood taller. The truth is, I didn't protect her that night. I froze. I had let my fear of conflict overpower my instinct to defend my daughter, and I've thought about that moment every day since. But Lena didn't wait for me to be strong. She was strong on her own. After that night, something changed in our family. Trent began reaching out. He invited us over for dinner one evening, just him and Caroline and their kids. No fanfare, no forced apologies. Just a quiet dinner where Lena was treated like she mattered. My mother, Evelyn, didn't change overnight. I didn't expect her to, but she did call me the week after and said, "That little girl of yours is something special." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest thing to softness I had heard in her voice in years. I stopped chasing their acceptance. I stopped editing myself to fit into the version of family they had built. Instead, I focused on the one I was building, with honesty, with love, with boundaries that didn't bend just to make others comfortable. That Christmas taught me something I hadn't realized I needed to learn. Silence doesn't protect anyone. It only delays the damage, and children are always listening. They are watching how we respond when the people around us show their true colors. They are learning whether to speak or to shrink, whether to trust the truth or hide from it. Lena taught me to stop hiding. She reminded me that strength doesn't always show up in big speeches or angry confrontations. Sometimes it shows up in a crumpled piece of tissue paper and a drawing done in crayon. Sometimes it walks across a room full of people and hands someone the truth, wrapped with care. We still don't go to every family gathering. Some wounds need more than time. They need consistency. But Lena knows where she stands now, and so do I. That year, we created our own tradition. On Christmas night, we sat by our little tree, wrapped in a shared blanket, and exchanged one handmade gift each. Nothing fancy, just something from the heart. I gave her a charm for her bracelet that said brave. She gave me a small painting of the two of us in front of a tiny house with glowing windows. The caption at the bottom said, "Where love lives." I hung it on the wall above our kitchen table, and I made myself a promise. I will never again stay silent while someone tries to dim my daughter's light. And I will never again believe that love has to be earned by suffering in silence. Family isn't just who shares your blood, it's who protects your heart. And thanks to Lena, I remembered how to protect mine. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt like an outsider at your own family's table, or watched your child face something no child should have to, I hope Lena's courage reminded you that silence isn't strength. Speaking up, even gently, can change everything. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the biggest truth. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. I read everyone, and your stories matter too. And if you want more real, raw stories about family, motherhood, and finding your voice, subscribe to the channel. We're building a space where honesty has a home. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.